Hi everyone, so today we're going to be doing a bit of a different sort of election predictions. We're going to be doing a Woodrow Wilson running on the Democratic ticket and Theodore Roosevelt running on the Republican ticket in 1912. So just a bit of background for the type of politics back then. I've skimmed this Wikipedia article on the election and also watched a video suggested by one of my viewers to be a bit more familiar with this presidential election. So Woodrow Wilson was running on the Democratic ticket, Theodore Roosevelt running on the Progressive ticket, William Howard Taft running on the Republican ticket, and then another third party in Eugene Debs running on the Socialist ticket. So as for these candidates, it's going to be very interesting to see how all of these candidates do. If we go ahead and look at the result, continuing with this background, Theodore Roosevelt had already been president. He had won previously in a previous year and beating Democrat Alton B. Parker, and he had become president. However, he had had some kind of a problem, and so he did not decide to run for a second term, and so instead he decided to hand the job over to William Howard Taft. Now, William Howard Taft is an interesting figure because William Howard Taft, he used to be close friends with Theodore Roosevelt. However, since then, in the lead up to this 1912 election, they had come kind of a bit shaky. I mean, William Howard Taft has not continued the progressive policies that Theodore Roosevelt had done, and so Theodore Roosevelt decided to run again, and so this was the election. He had run in the Republican primary. However, Taft did end up winning that one, so he decided to run as a third party like that. Okay, now, just quickly on politics back then, one more thing. It was very divided, if you will. Divided isn't the word. It was kind of opposite to the politics of today. The Democrats were the one who was more conservative. They were the ones who weren't as liberal. They were more conservative, and that's kind of a switch from today. I mean, it is a switch from today. Whereas the Republicans were the ones who kind of the Democrats of today. So that's why Theodore Roosevelt was in the quote-unquote progressive wing of the Republican Party, which seems weird today because the Republican Party is not progressive. The Democratic Party, if any party is, it's the Democratic Party. But yeah, so that's just a quick note on that. So since obviously there weren't any opinion polls or, other previous elections to go off of, so I'm going to be using the 1904 presidential election and the ones before that. So this one is 1912, right? And so we're going to be using the previous elections to kind of decide where all of these states would go. So let's start off in the South. I think this is an area where Woodrow Wilson could do quite well. If you look at some of the previous elections, you can see blue all across the South. There, more blue there, blue and blue. All of the South is blue. So I'm going to put the states of Texas, and then everything south from Tennessee and North Carolina, and then also Kentucky and Virginia. So let's fill in all those. So Texas, obviously Woodrow Wilson there. Louisiana also goes to Woodrow Wilson. Arkansas goes to Woodrow Wilson. Mississippi also in the Wilson column. Alabama in the state of Florida, this one moves into the Woodrow Wilson column. The state of Georgia, also in the Woodrow Wilson column. South Carolina, North Carolina, both move into the Woodrow column, and Woodrow Wilson, column. And also the state of Tennessee, the state of Kentucky, and the state of Virginia. So this gives Woodrow Wilson 139 electoral votes. And so now let's go ahead and fill in some more states. We're going to now fill in some states that Theodore Roosevelt won in the previous time that he ran for president. So we're going to be filling in some of those states. So we're going to do, if we look here, a lot of this Eastern Seaboard always seems to go Republican. So we're going to be filling that area out. So Maine goes to Theodore Roosevelt. New Hampshire moves into the Roosevelt corner. Vermont in the Roosevelt corner. Massachusetts moves into the Theodore Roosevelt column. Rhode Island and Connecticut both move into the Roosevelt corner. In the state of New Jersey, Theodore Roosevelt wins there. In Delaware, Theodore Roosevelt also wins there. And in Maryland, Theodore Roosevelt wins in the state of Maryland. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that because of this vote splitting between the conservative Republicans and, I was about to say conservative Democrats and the progressive Democrats, but the conservative Republicans and the progressive Republicans, I think that Woodrow Wilson might be able to capitalize on that, because those who supported William Howard Taft might jump ship and either vote for Wilson or vote for a different candidate. So, right, Theodore Roosevelt there. In the state of Pennsylvania and Michigan, Minnesota, South Dakota, I'm going to be giving all of these states over into Theodore Roosevelt's corner, because if Theodore Roosevelt was able to carry it under a third-party ticket, he is sure to carry it under a different ticket. So, okay, so if we go into just very quickly, I'm trying to find general election result. Here we go. Okay, yeah, geography of results, perfect. Here, so we can see in, we can see here, we could see in the state of Michigan, we could see a lot of votes in this kind of Rust Belt area for someone like a Theodore Roosevelt. It looks like Theodore Roosevelt got very close in Iowa, so I'm going to be giving Iowa also over into the Roosevelt column. Same thing with Pennsylvania, which he won back in his previous election. Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Minnesota, South Dakota, and I believe that is about it. Now, if we go here, right, we can see here that in the South, again, we can see Woodrow Wilson doing very well for himself, but we can also see Roosevelt doing quite well in some of these western states. So I'm going to be giving the states of Montana, the state of Washington, the state of California, and the state of Kansas and Nebraska all over into the Roosevelt corner. So let me find it. Here we go. So Washington moves into the Roosevelt corner. California, where was I? Nebraska, Kansas, all moving into the Roosevelt corner. Same thing with North Dakota and Montana. Here we go. With some of these kind of marginal states that, for some of these kind of marginal states, we can see here that in a very close election, William Jennings Bryan did win the states of Missouri and Colorado and Nevada. These are kind of border states, and so here, and even though the Republican there won, so I'm going to be giving Missouri, Colorado, and Nevada all over to Woodrow Wilson. I think they would be close states, they would be marginal states, but at the end of the day, I don't think it'll be enough. So Missouri, Colorado, and Nevada. And I also think that Utah, it was a state, if I can find the map, it was a state that voted heavily for the Republican here in William Howard Taft, if you look at the map. So I actually kind of want to give it over to Woodrow Wilson. I don't think that they would support someone like a Theodore Roosevelt. I do want to give it to Woodrow Wilson, but then again, it's hard to know. These people seem like pretty dedicated Republican voters in Utah, and so I kind of want to give it to Theodore Roosevelt a a more mainstream center right uh, third party. But at the end of the day, I think that Woodrow Wilson could narrowly hold on to that state, even after voting solidly for the Republicans. It doesn't seem that they want to give their support to a progressive like Theodore Roosevelt. Okay, so in Woodrow Wilson's landslide election here, we can see many of these southwestern states, namely Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, all move into the Wilson column. However, we don't have any other. We can't, since they weren't states back then. We don't know like how they would have voted. So I think it's best to look at the 1912 map, and we can see here in 1912 Arizona solidly went to Woodrow Wilson, so that one also moving into the Wilson column again. New Mexico is kind of a bit strange. I'm going to be giving that one to Wilson as well, just because the vote splitting I think would be enough to get Wilson over the line in both of these states. So Arizona and New Mexico both move into the Wilson column. As for Oklahoma, Oklahoma only recently became a state. It did vote for Woodrow Wilson. So we're going to take a look at it over here. We can see in the state of Oklahoma, it did vote for quite a bit of blue, but there was quite a bit of red there as well. But since it is in the South, I am going to be giving the edge here over towards Woodrow Wilson. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, this is like the center point, so you need to have this many electoral votes to be able to win. And so yeah, it's going to be interesting. So in total, there's you're going to have 104 electoral votes still undecided. Now, a big, I guess, matchup we might see is the state of New York. And yeah, so New York is his home state. And so just because I think that he would have a slight edge there, I am going to give the edge over to Roosevelt, and that actually puts him over the line here with 286 electoral votes compared to Wilson at 186. And now for the rest of these states, I am going to taking a deep dive because I do think that they would be relatively close. Okay, West Virginia, this one went quite a bit to Woodrow Wilson, but I think that with that vote splitting from the previous election, I do think that Roosevelt would have a solid chance of picking up West Virginia, but it's hard to tell. I think that, honestly, at the end of the day, I do think Wilson would narrowly hold on to West Virginia. It still is relatively in the South. Ohio and Indiana, if we look at both of these pairings of states, Wilson did win them. However, I do think Roosevelt can stand quite a solid chance here, like West Virginia, because it is in this kind of Rust Belt region where I think his progressive politics could play well. But again, at the end of the day, it's hard to see these sort of states moving into the Roosevelt column, so I will give the edge over towards Woodrow Wilson in these states. So Ohio and Indiana both move into the Wilson column. We have 3 states left. Wyoming, Idaho, and Oregon all are quite less electoral votes. So Wyoming, all 3 of these, I mean, last time actually, Theodore Roosevelt did not win in one county in this state, so I do think that Wyoming goes towards Woodrow Wilson. Here we can see Theodore Roosevelt had some success, but at the end of the day, it still did not have too many counties moving into the Wilson column, and like Montana, I think that Theodore Roosevelt could narrowly pick up Idaho, but then at the end of the day, I think that Oregon could move into the Wilson corner, so Wyoming and Oregon move into the Wilson category, and Idaho moves into the Theodore Roosevelt corner. So, I think this is a very interesting map. Apart from California, all of the Roosevelt states are all connected to one another, and all of the Wilson states are also connected to one another. Every single state, apart from California, is connected to another state that voted the same, and most also, except in the South, but most of the ones kind of on this border area kind of have a state that they share that voted differently to them. So I thought this was a very interesting election matchup. So thank you to the viewer here who suggested this video. Yeah, so I've just checked who suggested this video. It is Aiden. I believe that's his name. His channel is Aiden's Election Predictions. So thank you for that suggestion, and thank you for the video you recommended. That was very helpful in making this election prediction. So thank you to everyone who's watched it, and thank you very much for watching. Good night.